Darren couldn't believe that his 16-year-old daughter was gone until he saw her body in the morgue. To this day, he still has nightmares about that day, as well as the struggle between his daughter and her killer. The hardest part is, Darren accepted the murderer as his own family. They shared the same food at the dinner table most nights. Darren could have never thought that one day, the very person he cared for, like his own flesh and blood, would turn into a murderer and target his own daughter in the worst way. Welcome to True Crime Stories. If you're new here, I'm your host, Ty Knotts, and I post new true crime documentaries every single week. We don't use a bunch of AI voiceovers or overinflated drama. It's just good old-fashioned true crime. So if that's something you're into, consider hitting that subscribe button. It's 100% free, and it just lets you know when I post new videos. Rebecca Watts, better known by her nickname, Becky, was born after her parents, Darren and Tanya, had already gotten divorced. She initially lived with her mom, but was eventually put into the foster system because of concerns of neglect. But a few years later, she and her brother Dan went on to live with their dad, Darren. When Becky was a child, she was defined as a feisty kid. She was a ball of energy and had a lot of confidence. But tragically, when she grew up and got into high school, that was when she was in a very dark place. She was battling an eating disorder, and she'd burrowed back into her shell. Nonetheless, she was still kind and caring and had a great group of friends who loved and cared for her just the same. When Becky was in her teens in 2013, her dad Darren married a woman named Angie, who had a son herself, and now Becky had a stepmom as well as a stepbrother named Nathan. But all of these changes aside, life was going great, and she had a good relationship with everyone in her blended family, and she had a place to call home in St. George, Bristol. But one day in 2015 would change Becky's family's lives forever, and Becky would go missing. February 19th, 2015 was the day when Becky was last seen. Her mom Angie remembered seeing Becky at about 11:15 in the morning when she left for a doctor's appointment. See, Angie suffered from multiple sclerosis, and she had to go to the hospital for regular checkups. But when Angie and Darren both returned home in the afternoon and saw Becky was nowhere to be found, that was when they blew up her phone, but she wasn't answering. Then the parents took to social media and checked Becky's activity there, but it was also radio silent. This was a huge red flag for Darren. Becky, a typical teenage girl who loved fashion, movies, and taking pictures, was very active on social media, but now there were no updates, not even a blip of activity. This caused Darren and Angie to report 16-year-old Becky Watts as missing at around 4 p.m. The police first went about the usual questions. Did Becky run away? Was she under stress? Maybe she was out blowing off some steam somewhere. Well, those questions were immediately put to a stop when one of Becky's friends came forward and said that she had talked to Becky the day before and she sounded normal. She wasn't upset or contemplating running away from it all. The friend also told the investigators that she and Becky had made plans to meet up with each other the next day. The investigators then searched everywhere. Open spaces, park areas, properties in Barton Hill, South Mead, St. George's Park, and Troopers Hill Nature Reserve, and even water reserves, including Wharf Road and Fish Ponds, Trim Valley, Baddock's Wood. But again, it was like the ground or sky had swallowed Becky whole and left no trace. Despite having 6 search teams out at all times looking for Becky or any clue about her, absolutely nothing came to light. The police, as well as Becky's family, made several public appeals, asking for people to come forward with any information. They were desperate for answers. It had been days since Becky had gone missing, and they were worried to the bone. But 2 weeks into the search, the police would discover something, and this would be a tragic and devastating turn of events in Becky's case. The investigators were already searching the area of Barton Hill, but they decided to give it one more shot. They ultimately focused on a property that was in Barton Court, about 1.3 miles away from Becky's home in St. George, and it was there that they made a horrifying discovery. The detectives found some bags hidden away in a shed, and they had a really bad feeling about what they would find in said bags. When they opened them, it was like a scene from a horror movie. Body parts mixed in among cat litter and salt were found in the bags, and since Becky was missing, the investigators, as well as the community, were terrified of the possibility and what-if scenarios going through their heads. When DNA tests were run on the body parts, everyone's worst nightmare came true. The body belonged to 16-year-old Becky Watts, and she had been through the worst. An autopsy revealed that someone had suffocated Becky, but not only this, she'd suffered from about 15 slash wounds. Investigators were certain that this was a personal attack. The murderer, using their hands as well as weapons to leave Becky's body in the state that it was found, it sounded like a very rageful and passionate crime. Someone wanted to make sure that Becky was gone for good. Well, as tragic as the discovery of Becky's body was, it also opened a new Pandora's box. See, when DNA tests were run on Becky's body, as well as everything that was found with it, the police found more traces of DNA, but it wasn't Becky's. This led the investigators to suspecting two people who were close to Becky, or at least that was until they pretended to show the world away. Truth is, a lot of things happened in those 2 weeks when the search for Becky was underway. And I know I've kind of long jumped through everything to get here, but things are about to make a lot more sense. See, when detectives were busy searching for Becky, a bunch of investigators questioned Becky's family to get the gist of what happened on the day that Becky went missing. They talked to Darren, Angie, as well as Becky's stepbrother, 28-year-old Nathan, and his girlfriend, 21-year-old Shauna. And this was the first time the investigators were highly suspicious of two people in particular, and they were Nathan and Shauna. Firstly, the last people to see Becky on February 19th weren't Angie and Darren, but Nathan and Shauna. When the investigators questioned both Shauna and Nathan, they both remembered returning to Darren and Angie's house sometime after 11 a.m. And while Shauna was in the kitchen washing her hands, she heard stomping on the stairs and then the sound of the front door slamming. She thought it was Becky leaving in, quote, a mood. Nathan gave the exact version of events, and this was precisely what made the police eye them suspiciously. Both Nathan and Shauna had the exact same story. Word for word, scene for scene. No going off track even once or anything. To some people, this might not look suspicious at all, but both of their stories, to be exactly the same, was fishy to the police. To them, the stories seemed rehearsed, as if they practiced what they were going to say beforehand. Well, from this point on, things only got weirder. The fact that Shauna was all smiles and Nathan was uninterested and bored during the questioning also added confusion to the case. I mean, sure, Becky and Nathan weren't biologically related, but neither were Angie and Becky. But she was extremely worried and cooperative with the investigators, and always asking for updates on Becky's case, whereas Nathan and Shauna couldn't be bothered. Nathan and Shauna were continuously brought in for questioning by the police, and that was when the investigators discovered something very bizarre. For the first time, Nathan and Shauna's stories didn't line up. According to Shauna, Nathan was finding it hard to cope with Becky's disappearance. But when Nathan was questioned, he said he never really liked Becky to begin with. Nathan said that she was bratty and that he didn't like how she talked to his mom, Angie. Now, we don't know the relationship between Becky and Angie, but from the looks of it, everything seemed fine. I mean, sure, not everything was perfect since it was a blended family, but there didn't seem to be any major rift between Becky and Angie that could confirm Nathan's version of events. A promising clue in Becky's disappearance was when Becky's house was searched for forensic evidence. Becky's room was swabbed, swiped, and tested for all kinds of evidence, but when they reached the door, a discovery was made. There were faint red spots on the door to Becky's room, and as you can imagine, this wasn't a good sign. The specs were taken in as evidence and were sent to the lab for testing, and some days later, tests revealed that the spots had Becky's DNA. The investigators were sure that something bad had happened to Becky in this very room, and the people behind it were most probably Shauna and Nathan. Also, remember the DNA found on the bags in which Becky's body was found? Well, the DNA belonged to none other than Shauna. Why would her DNA be on Becky's body and the bags that she was in if she didn't know what happened to her? Moreover, the detectives decided to track the movements of Nathan and Shauna after Becky went missing. And what they found was pretty much the final proof they needed. The family had some dark secrets. The investigators were able to get a hold of CCTV footage from February 19th, and they discovered a great deal of things. First of all, on February 19th, the same day when Becky was last seen, Nathan and Shauna were seen buying batteries at a local Tesco. These batteries were used in stun guns. Now, you might be thinking, why did Nathan and Shauna need a stun gun? Well, hang tight because we're about to answer that question and a lot of other things for that matter. Well, on February 20th, the day after Becky went missing, Nathan was seen buying something really bizarre, a circular saw. In the days following this purchase, the couple also had been seen buying cleaning products and trash bags. Disappearance, finding a dismembered body, and now a stepbrother and girlfriend are buying sketchy things. Things weren't looking good. After this incriminating discovery, the police searched the home Nathan and Shauna shared. It was the police's first time stepping foot into their home, and from the looks of it, it was a mess, and that's putting it lightly. The walls, floors, cabinets, counters, everything was overflowing with things. If investigators didn't know any better, they would think they were standing in a hoarder's den. They literally trudged through piles upon piles of junk, and they made it into the bathroom, and that was where they stopped dead in their tracks. Nothing was alarming there per se, but the only alarming thing was how different the bathroom looked from the rest of the home. While the rest of the house looked like it had been through a hurricane and back, the bathroom looked squeaky clean, immaculately clean, like no one had ever used it even to shower or for a bath. Even the bathtub was so white that it was blinding. But to the police, this was evidence that something terrible had happened here. And if you add in the cleaning products that the couple bought earlier, well, it's safe to assume that these bathroom walls enclosed a chilling secret. Now, Nathan was just a weird guy from the start. When his mom Angie married Darren and Becky and Dan came along, Nathan got along with Dan but seldom even communicated with Becky. He didn't even live with Angie and Darren. He actually lived with his grandmother and would frequently visit his mom and stepdad just from time to time. It seemed like Nathan didn't like Becky, but this next bit is truly triggering and very infuriating. But when Becky was suffering from an eating disorder and would faint because of not eating enough, Nathan would be the opposite of worried. He would criticize Becky and say that she was doing it all for attention. He passed uncalled for and mean remarks about his stepsister, even though Becky did nothing to even provoke him. Becky was very shy and quiet, and she mostly kept to herself. Again, it didn't look like she was rude to Angie or wasn't accepting of her dad's new wife. If anything, it was Nathan who was being a petulant child, even though he was a grown man in his 20s. To make matters worse, Nathan had unusual interests. He was spotted hanging out with underage girls on more than one occasion. Darren remembered an incident when Nathan brought 4 young girls home with him in his car. They were a little older than 10, and Darren immediately demanded that Nathan take the girls back home. In 2008, 21-year-old Nathan introduced his family to his girlfriend, Shauna. Nathan told everyone she was 19, when in reality, Shauna was only 15. I want to point out that the age of consent in the UK is 16, so this was illegal without a shadow of a doubt. To make matters worse, Nathan and Shauna soon even had a daughter together. But if that weren't bad enough, the police were about to uncover some evidence that would take this horrible situation even further down the drain. The detectives finally made an arrest. Nathan and Shauna were arrested on March 2nd, 2015. And were charged with murder and perverting the course of justice. Ultimately, the duo was charged with conspiracy to kidnap, preventing the lawful burial of a body, and possession of an illegal weapon. To make things so incredibly worse, Nathan and Shauna were also both charged with endangering children as well. Now, I can't really get into this kind of stuff in this video or it may get flagged and pulled down, but police found images of children that were not great and certainly not legal. And both Nathan and Shauna were believed to have been the ones to have taken these photos of these individuals in compromising positions, and I'll just leave that there. It's clear to see Nathan and Shauna were pretty much the worst of the worst. A couple days later, a written statement was released in which Nathan confessed to murdering his stepsister, Becky. According to Nathan, on February 19th, he and Shauna went to Becky's home after Angie had left for her appointment. In Nathan's car, there was a bag filled with handcuffs, restraints, stun guns, masks, and other things that made up a so-called Kidnap Kit. Nathan confessed that once the couple reached the home, Shauna apparently went out to the garden for a smoke, and Nathan had a plan in mind. He wanted to scare Becky to, quote, make her behave so that she wouldn't be rude to Angie anymore. So he pulled a mask over his face, knocked on Becky's door, and entered. And that was tragically when things took a very dark turn. Out of the blue, Nathan subdued Becky with the things in his Kidnap Kit, and during the struggle, Becky knocked Nathan's mask off. Nathan, terrified of being found out, took Becky's life on the spot with his bare hands, and he then proceeded to attack her post-mortem with a sharp weapon about 15 times. He then hid Becky's body in a large bag and dumped it in the trunk of his car. According to Nathan, Shauna still didn't know anything at this point. What was so bizarre was that the couple lounged around the house after ending Becky's life until Angie and Darren came back. Once Nathan and Shauna left in his car, he bought all the things he needed to, quote, get rid of Becky's body, and then he took her to the apartment and put her in the bathtub of his and Shauna's home. The same bathtub that was immaculately clean. Nathan then loaded Becky's body, or whatever was left of it, in plastic bags and disposed of it in the shed in Barton Court. So after the arrest, you would think that everything's out in the open. But that wouldn't be the case. See, Shauna was adamant she had nothing to do with Becky's murder, and how and when Nathan disposed of her body. And even Nathan urged that he acted all alone. Well, Shauna's DNA was found on the plastic bags that contained Becky's body, as well as on Becky's body itself. So it didn't seem like a one-man job anymore. Moreover, deleted text messages between Shauna and Nathan that took place months before Becky's tragic passing were recovered, and they were haunting. See, Nathan and Shauna were planning on abducting teenage girls and locking them in their attic to do who knows what to them. The messages showed that Shauna was a willing participant in Nathan's twisted game of hurting children. Nathan and Shauna were literally the UK version of the Ken and Barbie killers, better known as Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka, who also worked together to lure their victims, who also happened to be teenage girls. Shauna, similar to Karla, was making plans with Nathan on how she would abduct young girls and bring them to him for his own sick and twisted pleasure. And speaking of phones, the investigators were also able to recover bookmarked inappropriate content that involved perverted violence of teenagers. Need I say more? These two are sick people, and they still have the nerve to deny everything. So what did Shauna say in her defense when investigators presented these messages? Well, she said that the messages were sarcastic and unfortunate. That's all. So, in October of 2015, almost 8 months after Becky's disappearance, Nathan and Shauna were collectively tried at Bristol Crown Court for her murder. The prosecution argued that Becky's murder was influenced by a crime of carnal nature. Nathan wasn't trying to teach Becky a lesson on treating his mom well. He deliberately attacked Becky because he was fixated on girls her age and wanted to take advantage of her in any and every way he could. The prosecution believed that Shauna was persuaded to join him in his fixation because, if you remember, Shauna was also a victim of Nathan. He basically groomed her. The prosecution also rebuffed Shauna's claims of not knowing anything about Becky's murder and how Nathan carried it out all on his own, because Shauna was with Nathan when Becky went missing. So her conveniently not knowing what happened to Becky was anything but convincing to the prosecution. The trial lasted for over a month, and on the 11th of November 2015, the jury delivered the verdict after debating for 3.5 hours. Nathan Matthews was found guilty of murder, and Shauna Hoare was found guilty of manslaughter. 4 days later, on November 15th, Nathan was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 33 years, and Shauna was sentenced to just 17. The reason why Shauna was given a lighter sentence is because she claimed she was forced by Nathan to do whatever they did to Becky. But if you ask me, she was still an accomplice at the end of the day. Victim or not, she didn't resist or stop what happened to Becky. So that makes her equally as guilty. Nathan and Shauna eventually exhausted all of their appeals, but Shauna was released on license in September of 2023 after serving only half of her sentence. She was released on strict license conditions and could be thrown back in jail if she breaks any of the rules of her release. Becky's family, especially her biological mom Tanya, was shocked at the news that one of her daughter's murderers was now out of jail. It was nothing less than a slap in the face for the victim's family. Becky's funeral was held at St. Ambrose Church in Whitehall, Bristol, on April 17th of 2015. Attendees wore white t-shirts with Becky's picture on them, and pink flowers adorned her casket. Becky's favorite songs were played at the service, and a white dove was also released outside of the church. This funeral was more like a celebration of Becky's life. Her family wanted to remember all the good times and memories with Becky, who lost her life in such a tragic way and had way more to look forward to than her very short 16 years of life. Becky's dad, Darren, also went on to write a memoir on his daughter's life and the murder and everything that affected him. It was titled Becky, the heartbreaking story of Becky Watts, but it was later retitled to The Evil Within. In February of 2016, the Neighborhood Watch Partnership funded the carving of a bench in Becky's memory. It's in Goats Field, which is close to her home, and on the bench are the words Becky and Bristol's Angel. On the back of the bench, a unicorn is carved. Becky was a young girl who struggled a lot with mental health, but was finally at a good point in her life. But then, that life was taken by one of the people that she'd learned to trust the most, someone she'd shared a home with at one point and often shared meals with. Usually, I make these videos to serve as somewhat of a warning about the dangers that are out there, but sometimes, cases like this, they do nothing but prove that even some of the people we hold closest may be hiding some dark demons. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of True Crime Stories. I wanted to give a special thank you to a couple channel members, including Tina Bowers and Amber Hoff. If you also want to become a member of the channel, you'll gain access to new videos days or weeks before they're uploaded to the public, and it's a great way to support the channel and help out. I appreciate all of you guys that have decided to do that. So if you also want to join, you can click that big join button below the video, or find the link down in the description. And don't forget, True Crime Stories t-shirts are also now available. You can grab one of those from a link down in the description as well. But as always, if you enjoyed this video, check out this other interesting case I covered. And don't forget to subscribe. It's totally free and just keeps you up to date with all my future videos. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.